Good evening, everyone. I'm Jayasri, and I'm bringing you the latest in the world of African startups from Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. So, welcome to My Startup TV Africa. Tonight, I bring you exciting news from the world of African startups, and I will also introduce to a very special guest who is joining us all the way from Africa in Morocco. Before we get started, I request all of you to subscribe to our different channels. We have a podcast on Spotify and Amazon. We are also available on different social media channels, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Koo. And lastly, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is My Startup TV. We also have other channels connected to it, like My Startup TV Regional. Now, without wasting any more time, let's quickly get to the news. So, the most exciting development in Africa right now, something that gets me exciting as well, is the GTEX 2024. So, you all know African tech is booming. The continent's biggest tech event, GTEX Africa, is happening in Morocco from May 29th to 31st. This year, the event will see over 1,400 companies showcasing their concepts and solutions in 21 halls, marking a 70% increase since last year. Artificial intelligence is a major focus, with experts discussing its potential to transform everything from healthcare to finance, a much needed requirement in Africa. The event will also bring together investors and startups aiming to raise as much as $10 billion by 2025. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Africa's movement to define its own digital future. Coming to next news, it's from West Africa. The UNICEF Ghana's Startup Lab program is launching it has already started its 2024 accelerator program. This 6-month program will support 25 tech-based startups that are focusing on social impact. The startups will get help with refining their business models, finding investors, and building networks. They'll also collaborate with UNICEF to improve their products and reach more children. The program is a big step forward in using technology to improve the lives of children and young people in Ghana. And in last news, according to a report, Francophone Africa is the only African region to demonstrate year-on-year growth in numbers of deals and investor participations in 2023. The region displayed resilience in terms of the number of deals, reaching a total of 93 deals and marking a 16% year-on-year increase, whereas the rest of the continent experienced a significant 32% year-on-year drop. This now accounts for 20% of the continent's total deals, up from 12% in 2022. Now, interestingly, our guest this evening is also someone who is an expert in the field of startups investments in Francophone Africa. I have the pleasure of introducing Mr. Ali Kettani, the founder and managing director of Athena Africa Ventures, a private investment bank operating out of Casablanca and Paris. But to give you more information about this, I will have Ali on the show itself. Welcome to our show, Ali.
Hi, Jayasri. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Fantastic. Before we get started, please tell our audiences about Athena Africa Ventures, and I will quickly get to all the questions.
Yes. First of all, thank you for a broad introduction, and you gave the actual background of what's going on, especially the excitement around the fact that GTEX Africa is coming to Marrakesh in Morocco for the second consecutive year next week. So this is very exciting for us. The second thing, I will quickly introduce Athena Africa Partners. We are a boutique investment bank. Our history comes from private equity, but in recent years, we are pivoting quite intensively to venture capital and technology. It's part of our DNA. I'm personally an engineer. Some of my partners are also engineers as well. And clearly, there's a bigger momentum, as you mentioned, generally for the continent, but up until recently, and you've mentioned the number of growth from 12% to 20% in Francophone Africa. There's really two Africas up until recently. There's the Anglophone Africa, obviously South Africa, but also Nigeria, Kenya, and Egypt. who were capturing the lion's share of the VC investment in the continent, to the tune of, as you said, 12%. It means that 88% would go to Anglophone countries. And the growth that you're seeing now is merely catching up of Francophone countries, North Africa and Western Africa primarily. Reason being that there's a cultural gap, obviously, and there's a network gap in the sense that from Anglophone countries, you have a diaspora that is very much invested in the United States, and Anglophone countries, so UK, Canada, and the United States. So culturally speaking, a much more mature knowledge and familiarity with venture capital, with technology, with the startup ecosystem as a whole, as opposed or as compared to Francophone Africa, where the relationships are more European, with
Mhm.
France, with Germany, and therefore there was a catching up to do, which we are doing as much as we can, so that this culture of entrepreneurship, culture of technology, culture of venture capital, also from the financial side, is slowly but gradually catching up. And this is what we do. So Athena Africa, as I said, we started primarily from PE. We are now very much invested in the VC space because we see on the two sides. We see on the side of the entrepreneurs that more and more young scientists or entrepreneurs in general, especially in certain fundamental sectors like agriculture and health and education, are jumping on the bandwagon of VC, are taking their courage and going to seek funds, taking their courage and raising friends and family fund to start a company around their idea. And the ecosystem as a whole, with the help of some incubators, with the help of some governments. So we have more entrepreneurs on one side, and obviously on the other side, the international VC funds and also some local VC funds, I will talk about that in a minute, are also catching up and also looking for the local gems, whether in Senegal, in Morocco, in Tunisia, in Cote d'Ivoire, and all the region. And they do find those gems. They do find people that are actively thinking about mobility, thinking about energy, thinking about healthcare, thinking about fintech, obviously. But it has been a little bit slower than Anglophone Africa. But with our help, we're trying to catch up as quickly as possible. And clearly, an event like GITEX helps a lot in this regard. So what do we do specifically? We do really two things. We are building a platform that is called Tech Ventures Africa. And that platform has an objective of not only nurturing local startups in various countries in Northern and Western Africa, but also helping international startups who, for any good reason, haven't come to the continent yet because it's not been their priority. What we're telling them is that with their solution, whether they come from Brazil or Canada or Spain or
Mhm.
elsewhere, we tell them, look, we've looked into your solution and we believe there are off-takers in our countries. We believe there's potential. Maybe because you're addressing your priority markets, you haven't had the time or the priority to come to our countries, but we are here as a platform to help you build up your company in Africa, with Morocco as a hub, but potentially in Senegal or Cote d'Ivoire as well, and Ghana. And we
Okay.
are going to find you not just the markets, let's say an agri-tech, for instance, who deals with water or who deals with the culture's preservation or protection. We will tell them, look, we can identify for you your best partners on the commercial side, but also some local partners, so some local investors who can invest locally with you in your subsidiary so you can develop your business without that taking too much of your bandwidth, so you can continue growing your natural markets, whether in Canada or Germany or whatever, but we will give you some resources, commercial
Mhm.
resources, technical resources, and financial resources locally, so that you can build up your subsidiary in Dakar tomorrow, and we will help you penetrate the local ecosystem. We'll help you talk to the people who will use your solution, and we will
Mhm.
interest the local stakeholders, especially on the financial side, on the investment side, into your solution. So it's really a two-way street whereby we help local startups not just develop domestically, but also be connected to the rest of the world. Because today, the beauty of technology is that there are no borders. If somebody has a great idea out of Abidjan in Cote d'Ivoire, well, maybe that idea is very relevant to somebody in Mexico or in Brazil. So that's our job, is to help African startups get into the world and to have world or global startups come into Africa, because without somebody like ourselves on the ground, it seems to them more complicated, maybe on the regulatory side or maybe on the commercial side. They have maybe the language also. We are talking about Francophone Africa. Let's say you have a startup in the US or in Italy, and perhaps they don't speak French, or they think it's difficult to get into Cote d'Ivoire. And our job is to make it a lot easier. So that's what we do. And obviously, as I said, there are more and more VC funds, some of them local, and that's the good news. We have, at least in Morocco, a very strong push by the government and by the private financial services sector, a big push with some grants and with some government money that's coming into the tech world, so that we can do this job, so that we can become a good destination for startups, obviously, that are not here, and of course a big boost to the local startups. And of course, we have a lot of funds, VC funds, who have perhaps neglected our region for a long time, but that are now looking for opportunities, regardless of the language, regardless of the borders.
That's a fantastic update about the situation of entrepreneurship in Francophone Africa. I always believe that the identification of Africa as one huge digital entity, it cannot be completed if Francophone Africa is left behind. So my next few questions will be about why the French-speaking part of Africa is slightly lagging. Although there are so many reports like the ones I just read out, which say that it is poised for an investment boom. So Ali, please tell me, what do you think of the Death Valley concept? What is happening there from the early seed stage? What is happening with
Yes.
that
Yes,
stage?
very good question. Just to complete on your point about why Francophone Africa has been lagging, look at, for instance, the fintech space. Fintech space has literally exploded in a lot of countries, in Kenya, as you know, in Nigeria, everywhere else, because the regulatory framework was very much inspired by Anglophone systems, UK and the US, so therefore much more flexible. If you look at Francophone Africa, the regulatory framework, the banking system are very much inspired by the French system, and it's very hard to penetrate that framework if you're a startup. So that has created some of the lag in one of the biggest segments, which is fintech. But there are other limitations. One of them has to do with education, had to do with how much in the higher studies in our countries, entrepreneurship is considered a value, a positive value, as compared to finding a good job or getting into a bigger company, a tech company or an IT company and whatnot. So that mindset is gradually changing, thanks to a push from not just the Anglophone world, but also the Mid Eastern world, where you will have funds from the Middle East who are very much into that American or so Silicon Valley type of mindset, which is inspiring our young entrepreneurs, male and female, to get into that. Now, about the Death Valley, it's a little bit out of experience that what we're seeing is that a lot of entrepreneurs manage to start their idea and manage to fund it with friends and family and their own time and their own investment, which is something that is sort of the pre-seed phase, where you can value this kind of investment as something that they can do. But they reach a point where they need money to get to the market. They need money to establish their pathway to revenue generation. They're proving their models, talking to the stakeholders. If they're building a solution for logistics, they have to get into the main logistics player, which they don't necessarily have the network for. So there are some limitations that are due to the social network or the entrepreneurship network in any country. And it's fairly similar when you go to Senegal or Cote d'Ivoire or Tunisia or Morocco. It's very much the same. There's a question of access, and there's a question of getting to that point where the model is sustainable and the model is proven to the main stakeholders. And this is where they have a problem, because They've invested as much as they could, again, with their own resources, friends, family, what they call love money, and their time. And then to get to the next level, there's a hurdle where they need to continue investing. We're talking about pre-seed money, so we're talking about amounts anywhere between $100,000 and $300,000. And why we call it the death valley, or why we believe it's a very critical hurdle, is that they are too big for business angels and they're too
Mhm.
small for funds. So, and sometimes it's really critical when you select the startup, precisely when you help the startup get to access the market that it's addressing by virtue of knowing the people and helping them also develop their marketing, getting them to challenge their ideas and to confront it to the actual business world. If you're dealing with agriculture, you need to speak with agri or agribusiness people. If you're dealing with logistics, you have to accept that you have not only to have access to the entrepreneurs in those sectors, but also to get challenged by them and to have answers for them. And in that area, very critical for the life of the startup. And many startups fail because the entrepreneur doesn't have the juice, doesn't have the fuel to get through that critical phase. Many startups fail. So our job is to say, look, in that specific segment between 100,000 and 300, $400,000, we are able to help you in all those regards that I mentioned, but also to bring you some more money of people who are sophisticated business angels. They don't necessarily know the entrepreneur. They're not an uncle or some brother or father or whatever or mother. Uh, we're going to bring you external people who can help you pass the hurdle up to the point where you can either reach the market and generate revenues or have an MVP that is validated by the ecosystem. And then you become bankable towards the funds, early stage funds. So we're talking about the gap between self funding, love money, if you will, and to the point where you can talk to professional, sophisticated seed money people. And this is more or less, I mean, obviously, we're talking about numbers that are relevant to our markets. We're not talking about millions, but we're talking about numbers between 100 and $300,000. We work with you to get to your MVP, to get to challenge your idea, and to have it validated by the off-takers, by the people in the ecosystem for the fundamental need, whether in health or let's say water management in agriculture and things like that. And when it's proven, when you start having revenues or you have an order from a big group, let's say in logistics, then you're armed to go and talk to professional funds, to seed funds or pre-seed funds. So you will be surprised at how many companies fail in that little hurdle. Either the entrepreneur is tired and they've used all their resources, and somebody comes in and makes them a job offer. They say, you know what, I'm going to put my project on the side for a while. I'm going to go work for a big IT company and then return in a year. So we see all of these things. What we are saying is that we want to look at as many companies in that situation and choose those where we believe we can make a difference, not just with money, but also to help them get to the next point, to help them on marketing, to help them on some resources, access to the market, as I said, and of course, have them also meet as many potential investors as possible so that they're also challenged and maybe they can pivot a little bit or refine their model. But the point is, we have to get them through that gap.
Fantastic. You make an excellent point about potential investors, and a minute ago you also spoke about how the modern world has changed and how there are no borders now. The access to resources is a lot more easier now. So, in your opinion, how do you think, say, developing economies like India or Mexico, like you mentioned,
Yes.
how can they support ecosystems in Africa? Like the French speaking part of Africa, how can these developing economy ecosystems support each other?
Yes, thank you for that very interesting question. First of all, we have to get over the hurdle of the language and the culture. And this, obviously, we speak in Morocco, we speak four languages: we speak Arabic, obviously, French, and many a time Spanish and English. So we are open to talking to pretty much players from all over the world. That's one. Second, I believe that culturally speaking, and I will give you an example in a minute. Culturally speaking, we are much closer to places like Mexico and Brazil than we are to Germany. Why? Because the social fabric is similar. We have social disparities, obviously, economic disparities, the fundamental needs. And remember, most of the projects that we look at have to find a solution to a real problem in the real world. If we're talking about health, it's access, it's making it easier to do diagnosis, making it easier to access to some medication and so on. If we're talking about agriculture, it's making it easier to improve the yields, even if you're a small farmer, to save water, to have better crops, to have better productivity. So we are dealing with actual problems. So what is important for us is to have those fundamental problems who will be very similar if you look at Brazil or Mexico, okay? Maybe not so much the US or developed countries in general, but those investors, those entrepreneurs in those countries will have met the same issues and will have had some solutions to those issues. So it's very easy for us to show similarities and to show that they would be a lot, much more familiar with our markets than they might have thought before. So part of our job is to say, and actually I was speaking with the doctor in Mexico yesterday, and told him, look, we have a project dealing with the patient experience in clinics, in private hospitals and clinics. And he underlined the fact that in Mexico, you have to have a very close care to not only the patient, but the families, because that's how the society works. And I was amazed to find that out, because I said, look, you come to a clinic in Morocco or Abidjan or Dakar, or, and you will find the same thing, because the social fabric is very similar. We are all developing countries. So obviously, when we identify players in those countries, we push very much to, first of all, make them a little more familiar with our markets, but also tell them there are opportunities, because what they have done successfully, let's say in Brazil or Argentina or Mexico, will be replicable, can be duplicated a lot more easily than they might think. And this is where we come in, because we can talk to these people, and the ratio also of investment is favorable to come into Africa, in the sense that with $1 million in our markets, you can make a difference, which you can no longer make in Spain or in developed countries. $1 million right now in the US, you can do nothing, because the costs are high, the salaries are high, access to any market is difficult, marketing costs are high. Whereas you come with something that worked in Argentina, for instance, you come with $500,000, we can have an actual business here. We can have a marketing campaign, we can have some development resources, engineers, IT, and this is the favorable gap that we have in our favor, and that's what we put forward. We say, look, if you really want to make a difference in agriculture, in health, in education, you can actually make it with a fraction of what it would cost to you to do the same in Spain or Italy or Portugal. So that's the game. It's an effort to put it forward and to find people who are receptive to this, who go beyond their own perceptions, sometimes wrong perceptions about how hard it is for Africa. I mean, granted, nothing is easy nowhere, right? But we have a way of bringing these people to meet our entrepreneurs, to be on the ground, and to understand that there's a large opportunity which is still within reach with minimum investment.
Okay. So, but on the point of investment, was the ratio of investment and impact, how does someone with your level of experience, as you said, entrepreneurship is in your DNA, how will you evaluate a startup's potential to navigate this death valley trap and maybe say achieve a sustainable sort of growth? What would
Yes,
be your, yeah, please go
very
ahead.
good question. Actually, what we find with a lot of startups that we're working with is sometimes we have to drive their ambition higher, in the sense that even themselves, sometimes they don't realize to what extent there are no borders for a good solution. So it's a question of addressable market and scalability. Let's say you meet an entrepreneur, and we have one in our portfolio who is in health tech. We are helping him understand that his solution can be applied tomorrow in Belgium or Holland or France, and anywhere actually, because it answers a need, or it answers a pain point which is everywhere. But of course, when we meet him first, his business plan will be based only on Morocco or only on his native country. So our job is to to help define the scalability, to help prove the scalability. And then scalability is not something that works in and of itself. You have to create the environment for that entrepreneur, particular entrepreneur, to design his solution so that it is scalable, so that it is duplicable in another language, another ecosystem. And for me, what helps is to show that the solution works in those kind of scales. Even if we're not achieving that scale in the first phase, even if the pilot or the initial development is focused on one country, by design, by all the technical design, by all the marketing mindset that the company must have, we have to be able to address the next market and the next market. Because keep in mind that each individual market, like Morocco, Ghana, Senegal, these are small, by the standards of technology, these are small markets. These are countries with anywhere between 20 and 40 million people. So this isn't enough. Like when you have a US startup, they have a natural market of 300 million people. So obviously their scalability is by design in their own domestic market. For us, it's different. We have to design something with various languages, various ability to be agile and to not have any hurdle in their mind about, okay, how do I go beyond my native country? I'm someone who's a Senegalese doctor. I've done some research. I have something that will help pharmaceutical companies develop drugs that are more relevant for African ethnicities. Well, in fact, I have to speak not only to the major pharmaceutical labs globally, but I have to prove to them that this is something that can be applied to maybe 20 or 30 countries. So this is the kind of mindset that we can bring to the startup because we're a little bit older and we have a global vision, if you will, not only for the continent but for the world. So we can connect those dots so that the ambition and the design of the project becomes scalable by nature, by design.
Wonder, is it how hard or easy is it to work with different governments when you speak of a global impact or a global network and a global vision?
With different governments, you said?
With different governments in different parts of Africa, you speak about a
Well,
product that has. Please
yeah.
go on.
Well, two things there. First of all of the governments in our countries, they want two things. They want to create jobs, and they want to stem the brain drain. They want to stem the brain drain, meaning the engineers, the inventors, the entrepreneurs have to be able to stay in their original countries. They're also looking to bring back some of the diaspora who have garnered some experience abroad and bring them to help. Especially, this is especially true in the field of health, okay, and IT obviously, but the IT is across the board. IT is just a tool, so it's across the board. So the governments want to do that. That's the first thing they want to do. So stem the brain drain and attract diaspora. The second thing is, even if they're not investing directly, all the governments, at least the ones that we're working with, they're working on grant schemes, on any kind of schemes that support the growth of the tech ecosystem. They cannot avoid it now. As a matter of fact, some of the countries, including Morocco, they have ministers that are dedicated to new technologies and development. This also has to do with the environment, of course, and the energy. So there's a big momentum which didn't exist 10 years ago. Now we have that kind of support. Having said that, we really don't rely on government. I mean, we are inserted in that ecosystem where we will do the work with the governments to be able to access grants, to have at least some support from the governments. But we are really dealing in the private sector. So the entrepreneurs, most of the time, they will be on their side. They may be incubated or helped initially by some government institutions, but by and large, they're isolated. They are doing their project on their side, and they need somebody from the private sector to come and help. And that's somebody from the private sector, for instance, a business angel who might be a large entrepreneur or the head of a large company or a high net worth individual. They will be keen to look at small companies because they, first of all, they want to help the youth. First of all, they are intellectually interested in what's happening with technology. Everybody hears that AI, for instance, is going to impact their business, so they want to keep an eye on what's going on so that they see how it can affect their business. And of course, they have income, or they have assets or investment capabilities, so that they can come and help that young entrepreneur. So most of our job is to connect those two ecosystems, so the entrepreneurs and the private sector investors. But of course, it's always under the umbrella of whatever initiative is happening in a given country. If a country is focusing on health, then we will be aware and we will be connected to the initiatives of that country on the health. Same in education, same in agriculture, which are the three main segments we are looking for, because they are dealing with fundamental problems, real problems, that will make a difference easily, that will make a difference in a very visible way in the short term. And remember, we are also trying to make that so-called death valley as short as possible. We want to see a big difference, a big impact made on those entrepreneurs in a matter of 18 to 24 months. Because what we want to do is to go through that difficult phase with them, and then hand them over, if you will, hand them over to professional investors, VC funds, some institutions. But we are handing over a baby that is almost walking or already walking, as opposed to a nascent baby who is still fragile. So this is our job, and we need to show that we are able to make a strong impact in a matter of less than 2 years.
As someone who so deeply believes in the entrepreneurship potential of Africa, in your opinion, what are the most important sectors in which startup solutions will emerge? Like, if I were an investor who's probably curious about investing in that part of Africa, what are some of the top sectors that you would recommend for me in terms of startups, not the general
Yes,
business?
absolutely. Look, as I said, you always have to stay connected to real world problems and things that touch the most people in the most simple way to understand: health, education, food security, meaning agriculture. Then, of course, you can think about other areas like mobility and energy. Mobility can make a difference in cities and in cities across the continent, because there's clear link to environment, clear link to giving access to populations to be mobile in an easy way in some environments where you don't necessarily have the roads or the infrastructure. Okay, so mobility is very important. Energy is interesting, but energy is a tough cookie, because usually energy solutions require a lot more resources. Although we have seen exceptions, we are working with a company in Cote d'Ivoire who is actually providing internet access uh, through light, through street lights in off-grid areas. So typically, this is somebody who came up with a great idea to say, look, in remote areas who are off the grid or underserved in terms of energy, I'm going to bring light through solar and use that particular energy that I'm capturing to provide Wi-Fi or internet routers. So that he's solving two problems at the same time. This is brilliant. So typically, in the energy, in order to do it in a relatively small scale, the kind of scale that we address, it has to be very creative and very niche, if you will. But all the other four that I mentioned, so mobility, education, health, and agriculture, there's a lot to be done. There's a lot to be done. You would compare productivity of a land in Morocco, which is just south of Spain, in a specific crop. Okay, let's say tomatoes. Okay, you will maybe tomatoes is not a good example, because we've made a lot of progress. But let's say a similar culture in Morocco and in Spain, you will have a factor of 2 or 3 of productivity of that land. That shouldn't be the case. And you have to get into why that is. Is it the seeds? Is it the water management, the management of fertilizers, and so on and so forth? So, how much technology can I bring to a specific crop to try and match the productivity that exists elsewhere, or maybe in Mexico and similar lands? So, there are real problems. And if you're an investor, first of all, you have to look at something that interests you, either by career or by taste or by intellectual interest, but you have to be able to get into the detail of what you're looking at. You're not just going to throw money at something that you don't understand. That's the first thing. The second is, we are talking about developing countries. We are talking about Africa. So you have to be able to make the most impact with the least investment and in the shortest time. Okay, so if you, it's really this impact attitude, which is very true in terms of health and education, particularly. You will, if you invest into a solution that helps girls in remote villages study from a distance, then you are making an impact in those girls' lives immediately. If you're looking at health access, is the same. So I would look at real problems, solutions that are within our reach in terms of size of investment. We're talking of investments, again, under $500,000, okay, and with some impact that can be seen in a matter of 1 year or 2 years, no longer. So not something super theoretical, okay. We do have projects in healthcare that have to do with research and super sophisticated type of research in diabetes, in uh, in cardiac diagnosis, and so on. But if I'm an investor, if I'm a private investor looking at Africa, maybe some Indian investors who want to to set foot in our region, I would deal with fundamental issues that can be solved in a manner that I can understand and that I can see in the short term.
Makes sense. That makes sense. So I'll squeeze in one last question. What do
Sure.
you, to a young, um, for a startup ecosystem, the one that you have described so elaborately and beautifully, what do
Thank
you
you.
think requires of, what is the most important component for a thriving startup ecosystem in an environment like Francophone Africa? Once again.
Well, first of all, I think the entrepreneurs have to be extremely focused and extremely passionate about their solution. They have to have a very strong and deep reason of why they want to do what they're doing. Either their family is a family of farmers and they want to see some improvement, or they come from a village where healthcare or education uh, are need to be improved, and they are passionate about it. That's the first thing. The second thing is the openness of the entrepreneur to talk to others. There is nothing you can do on your own. You have to talk to the stakeholders. You have to be able to talk to people who can help you, whether your teachers, your mentors, people like ourselves who come in to help, the investors, the entrepreneurs. You have to get in the game of talking about your solution and trying to refine it and understand and be listening to the input that people are giving you, to refine it and understand how you can go quicker, how you can make your solution much more relevant to the market you want to address. And the third thing I would say is ambition. Is if you're focused, if you invest yourself, insert yourself in the ecosystem, you have to aim high, because we are today, thank God, in an environment where borders don't matter anymore. But there are people who can help you take your solution from your original country to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. This is what made the success of the big startups or the big companies that we know today. But we don't have that mindset in our education, in our culture. However, you take a small entrepreneur in Texas, he will spend, or he or she will spend 6 months or 1 year in their business. As soon as the business starts working, they say, "Oh, I want to go global, or I want to go to all 50 states, and then I want to go global." And they get to that point extremely quickly. And this is something that we have to help our entrepreneurs get into that mindset of saying, okay, I need to be super focused. I need to build something that works. But as soon as it works, I am no longer a scientist. I'm no longer just an IT guy or an engineer. I am a businessman or businesswoman who can actually take my solution and go and sell it in the next country, and in the next one, in the next one. In Africa, we're halfway. We have countries that share a lot, either the language, either economic area, like WAEMU, it's the West African states. They have a common economy, a common currency, and so on. So it's halfway. It's not exactly the United States, but it's not an isolation either. So if you are out of Morocco, or out of Senegal, or out of Cameroon, there's an area that is fairly naturally accessible to you. But you have to want it. You have to have that kind of ambition.
That's actually quite an exciting vision for the future, and I sincerely hope that every aspiring entrepreneur who's listening to you right now takes a leaf out of your book and finds some motivation there. Ali Kettani, thank you so much for your insightful perspective and expertise on the investment landscape in Francophone Africa. We wish you and Athena Africa Partners continued success and
Thank
fostering a
you.
vibrant ecosystem for African partners. And to our viewers, please do not forget to subscribe to our channel. We, as I mentioned earlier, we also do podcasts on Spotify and Amazon channels, and we also are available on all the social media networks. So please don't forget to subscribe to us and stay tuned to us for more inspiring stories and innovations, solutions that are shaping Africa's future. Right here on My Startup TV Africa, on behalf of my entire team, I wish you all a pleasant evening. Thank you so
Thank
much
you,
for joining.
Jayasri. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure being with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much
Thank
again,
you.
Ali.
To stay informed about the startup ecosystem, subscribe to My Startup TV.